everybody, welcome back to my channel. So today I am going to talk about what you should do when you have 10 patients in an 8-hour day, you have a high productivity, and I'm going to give you 10 key strategies, key tips on how to survive that day. Because I talk to a lot of people and a therapist myself, working in skilled nursing facilities, you have a lot to do in a short time period. So I'm going to give you 10 key ways on how to survive a work day like this, okay? So, tip number one. And forgive me if you see me looking down, I just want to make sure I give you guys all the key points. So tip number one is to write down your clock in, your lunch time, and your clock out. So what I typically do is when I come into work and I clock into the computer, I make sure that I write down the exact time I clock in. Normally, if you work in a permanent building, you're going to know what time your patients usually have their lunch, or you may have a specific time that you normally take a lunch. But for me, I travel, so I'm a travel therapist, so I go to different buildings and whatnot, so it can be a little bit more challenging for me, so I would have to ask someone, hey, what time do the patients usually take lunch? And there's some buildings where some patients might have lunch at 11:30, 12 o'clock, and 12:30. So you really got to pick and choose. But we're going to get to that on how to really structure. So first thing, you clock in. You write down the exact time you clock in. You also write down the time you're going to take lunch, and you make sure you calculate when you're supposed to leave. So if you have a schedule for 8 hours, or you have, let's say, 7.5 hours of treatment for an 8-hour day, which is what I have, you want to make sure you write that down. So that's step one. So now step two, you always want to have a watch or your phone. All right, and now I'm not saying, walk around with your phone and be on Instagram and Facebook and while you're treating, but you want to always keep a watch on you or your cell phone. I like to keep my cell phone because I don't really walk around. I don't wear watches anyway, so I always have my cell phone, and I always look at, what time it is, what time I'm starting with a patient, or what time I walked into their room. Okay. Now, step three. You always want to check all of your patients' current level of functioning. So what do I mean by this? So when I get onto the computer, I'll have my schedule, and let's say I have 10 patients on that schedule, and for me, usually when I go to a new building, I don't know the patients, or if I came back to the building after not being there for a while, patients change. So what I would do is I sit down on that computer and I go through each patient and I make a little jot down on my schedule. So first thing I do, I go to the evaluation. It doesn't matter if the patient's been on program for 3-4 months. You go to that evaluation because there's key things you're looking for. You go to the evaluation, the first thing you want to do is just check their diagnosis. So just for a good example, we're going to use a John Doe, and he has COPD, okay, which is chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, for those of you who are not sure what the abbreviation. So I check the evaluation, and I make sure I check the diagnosis, okay. COPD, I already know what that is and what the normal treatment is for COPD patients. However, every patient is different. The next thing I look at is I look at their history, a little mini history. So that lets me know if either they live by themselves, they have family at home, and what happened in the hospital to get them to the facility. After I look at the history, the next thing I look down at is the precautions. Is there any precautions I need to know about? Is there anything also conflicting with their diagnosis? Those are so crucial, because you can have somebody that has COPD and they have also kidney disease, or they're diabetic, or they have orthostatic hypertension. These are key things you want to know because it's going to affect your treatment session. Okay? After the precautions, you want to look at their current level of functioning. Okay? On the time of eval. So you make a little side note of that. And if you have time, you just check to see what their static and dynamic standing balance is. If it's a fair, a good, a poor, that kind of gives you an idea where they were starting at. And then when you leave that, you want to go to either the last I should say the most current progress note, or you can go to the last 3 notes, treatment notes that was documented. Okay, so you're going to want to take note that from the time of the eval to the last progress notes, they could have went from max assist of 2, now they're at min assist. Or they could have went from max assist of 2, and now they're at max assist. So it gives you a good idea on this person. So you just jot down. So for me, in the corner, I'll write, let's say ADLs, their current ADLs is min assist. I'll write ADL min assist. And I'll also, even if there's a difference, because some people for their upper body, they may be, supervision, but then the lower body, they might be minimum assistance. So I always go with the lowest one. So if their ADLs said min assist, I'm going to write down min assist on that portion. And then I will also always take note of if they're they can ambulate. So if they need 1 assistance, 2 people, I'll just write min assist, ADLs, and what they can, if they're able to walk. And this is very important because if you expecting your patient to get up and do certain activities, you need to know if the person can even take a step. Okay, so that's important. Okay, so that was tip 3. Now tip 4. This is very important. You want to organize your treatment depending on your patient. So what does that mean? Okay. You may have, let's say, 2 patients that that's total dependent. Okay, a lot of times when patients are total dependent, you can see them bedside because it really depends on if the CNAs are going to pour them into the chair or whatnot. But when you first go in, you want to know that if they're total dependent, it's going to require you to either co-treat with physical therapy or you're going bedside. You also want to look to see if there's any feeders on your list. If anybody goes for feeding, that lets you know, hey, I can probably see this person for breakfast because sometimes if you come in early in the morning, patients might not be ready. So those are your go-to people, okay? So you're either looking for your feeders, so you either go to them during lunchtime or breakfast. People that are total dependent, you want to either save them for early morning, so those are your go-to people, or you want to save them for your last treatments in the afternoon. And then everybody else, which is more your high-level people that fluctuate between contact guard assistants, moderate assistants, those are the people you have in between. So you're already structuring your day before you even begin. The thing that I see that therapists do is they'll come in, they won't really take time to look at who they're treating, and then they just go, and now they're asking the patient 100 questions, which they should already know as a professional. Because patients look at that, and you want to make sure that your patient is confident that you know what you're doing. So going up to the patient and saying, okay, so what happened at the hospital? Okay, are you able to do this? Bad look, guys. Let's be a little bit more proactive. Okay. Tip number 5. Okay. You want to be able to identify what your patient needs. Okay. You want to identify key things that they need. So we're going to go back to John Doe, which is a COPD patient. We already know that with COPD, this person is probably going to require a lot of activity pacing. Okay. Now, all patients are different. Every patient comes with something different. They're never always the same. So if you see your patient, some COPD patients may be actually pretty high level. They surprise you, they're able to do quite a bit, whereas you have others that, just doing, picking up something, they're already short of breath. So you want to be able to identify what your patients can do, and this is going to allow you to structure your treatment. So what I like to tell, any students I'm working with, or even just my patient, is we're going to pick two key things. Okay, we're going to work on two key goals, and what that means is, let's say for instance, this person is supervision for putting on their shirt, but they require maximum assistance to put on their pants, and that's because maybe A, they have a hard time standing up. B, their balance may be really off, you know, and it requires a lot of assistance because they're unsteady. And C, they just have a hard time maybe going through the sequence or bending down to put their leg through, or even just simply lifting their leg may be a challenge. You're also assessing the cognition. Are they having difficulty with the sequence? Are they having difficulty, you know, knowing, should I put my leg through this hole, this part or that part? So you're always assessing as an occupational therapist, your brain is constantly flowing. So I always tell people, if you want to see your patients progress, you always work on what they tend to have difficulty with the most. Okay, because you're constantly working on that. You're constantly providing reinforcement and carryover strategies. Okay, so that's important. So you want to make sure you identify their key needs. So if this person needs 15 minutes of break or 15 minutes rest, that's what they need. You know what I mean? We're not going to push people beyond what they can do. You're going to want to motivate them and support them, you know what I mean, to help them progress and encourage them, but you're not going to push them beyond what they can do, because at the end of the day, it's not all about you. It's about the patient you're working with, okay? All right. Step number 6. So you want to make sure you create a pattern. So let's say if I'm in a building and I'm in that building for, let's say, 3 weeks, okay? Now I get a little bit more consistent. I know my patients. It's a lot easier when you come in to already structure your day. It's going to be quicker to structure your day, because now you know your patients. You have a good idea of what they can and cannot do. So when you want to create a pattern, so for example, going back to this John Doe, he has COPD, he has difficulty putting on his pants. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to work on things to facilitate him to be able to do that. So for example, you know, we might do some tricep exercises, being able to have him do a couple of sit to stands, or maybe 5 repetitions of just pushing up, keeping his balance. Maybe at times you can have him let go of the walker with one hand while he's still supporting with the other, and then you start progressing him to being able to stand, to let go with both, trying to maintain static standing balance. That's a treatment session right there, just working on sit to stand, working on postural control, making sure that when he is standing, he's not leaning over to the left, to the right, forward, or back. Usually back, you can call that posterior leaning or retropulsion. So those are the key things you want to look for. You also want to work on adaptive equipment. Maybe he needs adaptive equipment because maybe he just is unable to bend over. That could just be a challenge for somebody, and that could make it maximum assistance, is because it simply just can't reach. Okay, so as you go through every treatment session, you should always start off with, okay, he is doing sit to stand, 5 repetitions, okay? Then the next part will be sit to stand, 5 repetitions, 2 sets. Then you can progress it to 10 repetitions, or 10 repetitions, 2 sets. It's up to you how you want to do that. Then you can also work on simply starting off just getting him to thread his legs through the pants hole. Not even initially standing up, but you can work on getting his legs to thread through the pants hole. Or you can simply work on just using adaptive equipment. So if he's never used a reacher, you can work on having him, you know, picking up things with that reacher, getting him to reach down, pick up something off the floor, bring it to his hands. So you're actually going through the motion, you're going through the sequence of when it is time for him to use that reacher to bring the pants down to his feet, okay? You can also work on, let's say, weight shifting. Let's say maybe this person may have a certain precaution, or they're non-weight bearing on one of their extremity, and that's why they're maximum assist. You can work on simply weight shifting side to side, okay? I actually did a video on lower body dressing. Make sure you check that out. And that shows you a cool way to train patients on lower body dressing when you don't actually have the pants in hand, or you just simply have them in a treatment room with everyone else, and you don't have that time to bring them back to the room to work on lower body dressing. Okay, so check that video out. All right, so tip number 7. So tip number 7, caregiver training. CNA training, okay, this can always be a little tough, okay. You probably hear about the stories with OT against nursing and PT against OT, whatever. But caregiver training, this is billable, people, okay. For example, if the patient's family comes into the therapy gym, take advantage of that time to educate them on obviously you want to make sure that you can speak to these people and they're approved to know about, your patient's diagnosis and what's happening with therapy. But you want to take that time to educate family members when they walk in. If I have the ability to show family on how their mom and dad is getting on and off the toilet, you better believe I'm going to take an opportunity to do that. But I will educate them saying, you know what, John Doe, at this time, he needs assistance. I would not recommend you doing this with him, but I do want you to see how he's doing it. So if for any reason he is in the room with the CNA, you can say, hey, mom, dad, remember your hand needs to go back. Things like that. Now, when it comes to nursing staff, you got to kill them with kindness. You need them and they need you. So you really need to just kill them with kindness and show them respect. That's really what it comes down to, guys, at the end of the day, because you got to really remember that CNAs are extremely busy, and a lot of them are either they're underpaid or they just have a ridiculous caseload. They may have 10 patients for just one. So you want to keep stuff like that in mind. So whenever I can, I'll tell them, hey, I'll help you out today. I'm going to do ADLs with Mrs. So-and-so, and just so you can take some time to work with someone else, or simple things like that. They really do appreciate when you come up and you kind of give them a little heads up, or you tell them, you simply just, hey, how's it going? I know it's probably a busy day today. This is my list of people. Do you have any of my people? Maybe we can work around some of these people, stuff like that. And believe it or not, they really appreciate it. So when it's time for patients, when you need patients, they'll probably be the first one to be like, okay, I'll get that person dressed for you first, okay? And remember, it's billable if you're educating the CNA, okay? You have 60 minutes of treatment. 15 minutes of that can simply be just educating the aide on carryover techniques. You can bill for that, because a lot of times I'm walking in the hallway and one of the aides will stop me and be like, oh wait, I have a question about so-and-so. That is billable, guys. You got to be smart. It's billable. Okay. Tip number 8, the beauty of setup. All right. So what do I mean by this? So let's say you have Jane. All right. You've been working with Jane. You have Jane for about 60 minutes. And John just came in. Now you have Jane, but you have probably 15 more minutes left with Jane before the end of her treatment session. And I've seen some therapists do this. They have about 15 more minutes left with Jane, but they'll end up sending John back because they say, John, I'll come and get you once I'm done with Jane. I'm sorry, guys. I don't do that. Why? Because by the time you finish with Jane, if you have the beauty of having a rehab aide that does transport, that's great. But sometimes facilities I go to, I am the transport person. So by the time you're done with Jane, and then you're going for John, to find John, to bring him back there, that was just your 15 minutes. So what you want to do, Jane, either give her a task where she has to sit down, or you're giving her exercises, because this comes down to structuring your day, knowing who you want to see, when you want to see. Now, sometimes that may not work out because people may have an appointment, and you may go to them and they say, oh no, not right now, or they may have family visiting, but you still want to structure it. There's ways and means around this, guys. Trust me, there's ways and means to make this all work. but you have Jane doing her exercises. Maybe you have her doing a dowel or a dumbbell, and she's doing her exercises, and you have her in the line of sight. And now you're bringing in John. You're saying, you sit John down. You say, okay, John, I'll be with you in a couple of minutes, but this is what I want to educate you on. This is our plan for today. This is what I'm going to have you do, etc. You give John his weight. By the time you're doing that, Jane should probably be just about done. And then you say, okay, Jane, thanks for coming. Either the aide can bring them back, or you can say, Jane, give me 1 second, take a rest period, take a break, while you allow John to do his first or second repetitions of exercise. It's up to you how you want to play it. This stuff is billable, guys. You can bill for this because you're transitioning over to a patient. They're not doing the same activity, okay? You are doing preparatory tasks. You're preparing John for what you're doing while you're completing with Jane. This stuff is billable, guys. I'm trying to tell you, please listen to me. It is billable. Read your Medicare guidelines. It's in there. You can work around it. It is billable, because I know they try to say, hey, you can't see 2 patients at the same time, but you're not. You're not. You're preparing 1 patient for this session while you're allowing your other patient to finish to leave. Okay. All right. Tip number 9. So you want to pay attention to your patient. Okay. All right. So let's move off of. Actually, we can stay on John Doe. So a COPD patient, John Doe, he requires 15 minutes of seated rest breaks. Okay. It is what it is, guys. If he needs 15 minutes, let's say he's having a hard time, he needs that rest period, you're going to let him sit. While he's sitting, what you can do, you can check his oxygen saturation levels, you can check his vitals, you can coach him through therapeutic breathing, pursed lip breathing, deep breathing. You can still do something while someone is resting, okay? Those are like 3, I just give you 3 things what you can do while somebody's resting. And it's still billable, even if, let's say even if you already did those things, you checked their vitals already, and you educate them before you started the activities on therapeutic breathing. If someone needs to rest for that 15-minute period, you allow them to rest. You can even take advantage of doing your documentation while they're resting. It is all billable, okay? It is billable, all right? So if this person needs a break, you got to give it to them, and you bill. You just document. Mr. So-and-so requires maximum rest periods, or it's up to you how you want to describe it, but you document that because that's what it is, okay? Sometimes, I hate to say it, but sometimes I see patients that clearly the resident needs extended rest periods, and they would still push them. And in their minds, they're like, I need to be able to bill for something. You are billing for something. You're billing, expressing that they're having fatigue. They may be having shortness of breath. They have poor activity tolerance. It's all billable, and it comes down to your wording. All right. So, tip number 10. Tip number 10. Don't get too wordy with your documentation. Okay? Keep it simple, concise, straight to the point. Okay? You don't want to write so much that it gets overwhelming. So, for example, I'm a therapist. I come into a building. I'm trying to check treatment session notes so I can have an idea of what's going on with the patient. Excuse me. And sometimes I see under just one billing code, it's like 2 paragraphs. And it's just wordy. And then it's like, oh, okay, there we go. That's the part I need. I just need to know what their static or dynamic standing balance is. But there's all these extra words, and it's like, I don't need all that. Just tell me what they're doing. So here's a little example. You can simply say, let's see. Functional mobility with rolling walker from bed to toilet or bed to 3-in-1 commode requiring minimum assistance with 25% verbal cues to ensure safety, or 25% verbal cues. You can even break that down even more. Obviously, I always tell people it's important to use complete sentences. However, it's depending on your building. Some buildings is okay with you writing functional mobility with rolling walker to/from bed, within room, min assist, plus 25% verbal cues. And that's it. Okay? Straight to the point, because sometimes I see therapists writing away, typing away, only to say one thing. So keep that in mind, because at the end of the day, you're still on a clock, guys. Productivity is still knocking at your door at the end of the day. All right? So practice makes perfect. I would just, practice on how to make what you're trying to say a little bit more concise and direct, straight to the point. And here's a little bonus for you. Here's a little bonus, a little extra. I always like to have a ritual or routine in the morning before I even get to work. Okay? Because it's not worth going into work feeling stressed out. It's not fair to your patients when you come in with an attitude, or you're already pissed off because you have 10 patients or 11 patients. They don't deserve that. They already have a lot they're dealing with trying to get better. And you want to treat them with the utmost respect, because honestly, if you show patients love and respect, they're going to show it back. Now, some patients, especially a dementia patient or other patients that maybe have some cognitive deficit or some anger issues, they may be having a bad day, but you can't take it personal. You really can't. All right? So you can either meditate in the morning. You can say an affirmation, which is what I like to do. I also like to pray before I walk into work. I usually pray for myself. I pray for my patients. I pray for my coworkers. I pray that I have a good day. I pray that nobody gets me upset or I upset somebody else. Trust me, it works. Prayer works. And, also speaking positive throughout the day. Sometimes I'm in the car and I'm driving and I'm listening to like a motivational speaking, or I'm just speaking positive to myself while I'm driving, and I'm saying, Tamisha, today is going to be a good day. The day is going to fly by. Nobody's going to get on your nerves today, and just go in there, get it done, get out, and have a good day. Something so simple, guys. So I really hope this helped. I hope this video wasn't too long. Please, if you have any comments or if there's other tips you want to add, definitely leave it in the description below. I would love to hear from you guys, and keep looking out. Let me know if you like these videos. Let me know if there's any special topic you want me to talk about or analyze. I'm your girl. All right? Stay tuned, guys. Don't forget to subscribe as well. Bye.